About 3 weeks ago, I started a new series. We're calling it The Road to Recovery. And we introduced this series out of John chapter 5, first of all, the event we're all familiar with, Jesus and the healing of the paralytic at the pool of Bethesda. And we just started out with the question, would you be made whole, or do you want to be made well, depending on the version of the Bible that you're reading. And we talked a little bit that first week about the many things that I have discovered in my 40-some years, almost 40 years, I should say, in the ministry. Many of the things that Marilyn and I have encountered that show us that not everybody wants to be made well, that not everybody wants to be made whole. And we went over several things, certainly not an exhaustive list, but enough of a list to let you know that there are things in each and every one of us that sometimes scream out in the way that we live, and the way that we live through life, that we really don't want to be made well, even though we hear the Master asking us, do you want to be made whole? Talked a little bit about that. Then the next week, last week, we talked a little bit about actually what Jesus said in a more literal way. Jesus asked this man at the pool of Bethesda, do you will to be made well? And we talked about the Jesus' emphasis on the man's will, and the necessity for us to understand that great power that has been placed within us by the Father, and our ability to will ourselves well. And a lot of people don't will themselves well. So you got to have the want to in order for the will to be able to kick in. And a lot of people, just don't want to be made well because they might lose their welfare check. They might lose their disability check. And again, I'm not against any of those things. But what we're trying to do is just put some things out there that will help you understand, the want to, and how many times we stifle the possibilities in our life for being made whole. Just simply by hanging on to the things that have given us a false security in the earth around us. Many times it's just a matter of we desperately need attention. So many people in this life need attention, and it's something that we all have to have. We need attention. We can't just be ignored. And many times people, particularly people with notable infirmities, are in fact ignored by society and sometimes by their own family. And so consequently, the attention that they can garner from their infirmity many times is better than no attention at all. And so many times we find that we play on those things, that we become whiny around the house. And I want Marilyn to pay more attention to me. It doesn't work in my house. She just tells me to man up and get over it. But there are people who actually would be compassionate to my whining. She's not one of them. No, no, you know what I mean. But I'm obviously being a little ridiculous with it, and I don't want you to find yourself saying, "Gosh, I've been getting a disability." That's not what it's about. I'm just using some of these things to help us understand how we can become so entrenched in the provision of the world in one way or another for us, whether it's attention or physical or financial, whatever material, or any kind of material. Ongoing provision, that we sometimes are actually saying, I can't really afford to give up this thing that is providing for me. You understand what I'm saying? But we talked about the will, and we're going to talk more about the will as we go on through this. As I say, this is a road to recovery. And so we are just getting up on the road together, and we're not. We're going to take some very specific steps down the road together, and we'll come back to the power of the will. But hopefully there was enough out there, and it should be up online today. We had some difficulties for a couple of weeks with our recording situation, and so it took a while for Caleb to get the first one up, and he told me today he'll have last week's up today, and then he'll have today's up in just a couple of days for those of you that need to go and maybe review some of this stuff or hear what was said. But anyway, today we're going to look at another particular aspect on the road to recovery. And as I told you before, these are things that have become a part of our life, mine and Marilyn's life, our expectation, things that we have rested our confidence in and upon, things that we have learned to participate in. I hesitate to use the word practice too much because then people think you're getting into works, but it is a practice. There is a practice of wholeness. There is a participation in wholeness through practice, not through just hoping and wishing, right? And so a lot of these things that we're talking about are things that have become our practice, if you will, or our understanding of wholeness. Remember, wholeness begins within. It is a superficial healing, Jeremiah tells us, unless peace is restored within. You know, remember he said they heal the hurt of the daughter of my people slightly, or that word means superficially, saying peace, peace, when there is no peace. And we find that when Jesus says, do you want to be made whole? Jesus is in fact certainly concerned about the physical, the outward, the manifestation out here, but he is also bringing into our understanding the reality that so much of what is reflected outward is a result of what's going on inside. And we all know that. We've all been there, done that, right? Let's go and turn with me this morning to Matthew chapter 9 and verse 29. Well, I'll start with verse 28 because I'm going to make a brief reference to that in just a moment. And when he had come into the house, the blind men came to him, and Jesus said to them, do you believe that I am able to do this? They said to him, yes, Lord. Then he touched their eyes, saying, according to your faith, let it be to you. He touched their eyes and said to them, according to your faith, let it be to you. Now, you know, most of us have assumed somewhere along the line that he was referring to some, particular doctrine or some particular belief system. That's kind of the way we've been led to believe, according to your faith, right? But even though Jesus had said to these fellows in that previous verse, do you believe that I am able to do this? I want you to understand something. Now, hear me clearly. He was not solely saying, according to your faith in God, it'll be unto you by me. What did he say? He said, be it unto you according to your faith, right? Be it unto you. Now, they had come to him and said, Son of David, have mercy on us, or Son of Man, however they said it. Have mercy on us. And he said, do you believe that I am able to do this? There's no question that he did insert himself into the equation here. But when he said unto them, be it unto you according to your faith, right? I want you to understand that he was not just saying according to your doctrine or your belief system in God, will it be done to you by me? He was saying something much bigger than that. Now, I would like you to remember that Jesus, I think I've said this to you on several occasions around here, right? I want you to remember that Jesus as the Son of Man. Now, the Son of Man is the most frequent and emphasized revelation of Jesus in the Gospels. Yes, Son of God appears a few times in there, right? And there's no question in our minds that Jesus is Son of God. But the point is, the revelation of Jesus, the Word made flesh upon the earth, was primarily as Son of Man. And here's what I want you to get a hold of. Son of Man, of course, reflects back on son of Adam or son of the first, like that, all right? But as Son of Man, Jesus was restoring the lost knowledge, you've got to get this, was restoring the lost knowledge of humanity's roots and origin. In other words, Jesus, the Son of Man, I'm going to keep saying it like that, was calling humanity back to their true identity and heritage. Jesus was the living testimony, of the plan of the Creator for humanity from the very beginning. Jesus, identifying himself as Son of Man, was aligning himself with perfect Adam prior to any fall that we would consider, okay? In other words, he's saying this is what humanity was always intended to look like. Yeah. Me. I am, in fact, as some people say, the true human. I am the true representation of humanity as was ordained of the Father when he said, let us make man in our image according to our likeness and let them have dominion, right? So Jesus was, in fact, the living testimony. He was the Son of Man, as the Son of Man, was restoring to humanity's understanding the lost knowledge of what God had intended for each and every human being from the moment of let us make man evermore. Does that make sense to you? I want you to get that, okay? Now, I've said this to you on several occasions. We said it last week. Okay, when we look at this word faith, be it unto you according to your faith, the way we need to hear that in order to really progress without falling into some kind of religious bondage about this thing is we need to realize that the word faith, which has been, has become a religiously associated word with most people, the word just simply means persuasion. What you're persuaded of, right? And so, consequently, faith, when we hear the word faith or read it in the Bible, it isn't necessarily, a God reference. The truth is, I want you to get this, the truth is, it is always unto us according to our persuasion. It is always unto us according to our persuasion. Now, when I say it is always unto us, I'm not referring to the coming of tribulations against us. I'm referring to the resolution of those tribulations that come against us. When I say it is always unto us, Jesus said, in this world you'll have tribulation. So that's not what I'm referring to. Many of you have heard me say this. It was over 40 years ago. I heard the Spirit of God speak to me one time and say to me, "Son, I want you to understand that you have control over the outcome of the events of your life." In other words, there's some stuff you're going to bump into, some stuff's going to try to run you down that you have no control over. But what you do have control over is the outcome of those situations. That's what I'm referring to when I say that it is always unto us, in the finality of it, if you will, at the conclusion of a matter, according to our persuasions. Now, over the years, I've had many people tell me, bah humbug, when I've made that statement I just made. And guess what? They have had less results of a positive nature than Marilyn and I have by understanding that we do have final say over the outcome. Right? Not we because we're anybody special, we because of what I'm going to talk to you about today. And I want you to get this. This is so important. When you take this persuasion concept and you put it together with the understanding of will, it will begin to make a huge change in the outcome of the events of your life. So far, so good, right? Okay. So each one of us is and always will be the testimony, a living testimony of our persuasions. Now, I'm not saying that to guilt you or condemn you in your current infirmity. Infirmity, remember, is not strictly physical disease, it is the inability to produce results. All right? I'm not saying the things I'm saying in order to condemn you or to be critical of you, because then I would be in the same pot with you in this, okay? It would be the pot calling the kettle black. What I'm doing is trying to stimulate, our thinking to the possibilities and the opportunities that exist under the creative direction of our personal persuasions. Now listen carefully. This is very important that you get this too, because the way I've already started talking about your will and your persuasion and the impact that they have on your life events. Many of you, maybe, I don't know if you'd use these words, but many of you may already be thinking, well, this is somewhat of a Gnosticism. This is a Gnostic, message. No, it's not. This is not a Gnostic. This is not a self-sufficiency. This is not a New Age. This is not an autonomous message that I'm presenting to you. I want you to get that. This is not a message that says we don't need the Father and we don't need Jesus. That's not what this message is. I want you to understand it, okay? First thing we need to realize is that what I'm talking about is that this in persuasion and will and so on and so on. This was the Father's impartation. This was the Creator's gift to humanity from the very beginning. So it is of the Father. Does that make sense to you? This is of God. So when I say that your persuasion or your will exercise tremendous influence over the events of your life, Do not think I'm turning New Age on you. Don't think that I'm putting out a Gnostic message or a message of autonomy. You see what I'm saying? Okay. And then also I need to say this, that, this is, as I said, this was a gift. The gift of dominion that was placed in man from the very beginning, right? But it's a gift that was taken captive by the deception of I am naked and afraid and I am separated from my Creator, right? And again, we've been over that 1,000 times around here. Where are you? I was afraid because I am naked and I hid myself from you. I broke connection in my own mind with you. So, as I said, this gift that God had placed in humanity from the very beginning for all humanity for all time was taken captive for a season, a rather long season, but a season by the deception of naked and separated, okay? And what we need to realize is, again, Jesus as Son of Man, right, is the denial of the deception. He is the living testimony, as I said a while ago, he is the living testimony of God's intention for humanity from the beginning as the Son of Man. There would be much more to be said about him as the Son of God, but right now we're talking about this Son of Man revelation of his, okay? So, as I said, he's the denial of the deception. His resurrection destroyed the power of that deception and restored or revived humanity's participation in the blessing of the Father's gift. Because you remember the Father's gift is, Genesis 1:26, let us make man in our image, according to our likeness, or as our likeness. Remember that word means as our likeness. And let them, see the word them is important because it's not a singular word, it's a word that refers to the plurality of humanity. Let them have dominion, or let them rule, some say. All right? And then to shorten that verse, it says over all the earth. But then we go further and we see that not only is that statement pre-creation, you might say, pre-creation of man, but then in verse 28 we find it says, and then God blessed them. God did what? Blessed them, the same them he was referring to in verse 26, and said, be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth, subdue it, and have dominion over, and again, to shorten the verse from all the fish in the sea and all those things, over every living thing that moves on the earth, right? So we have the Father's gift being communicated as desire in verse 26, and then we see the Father's gift being bestowed as blessing upon them in verse 28, right? Okay, so in other words, this gifted characteristic of our humanity is intended to be the authority for subduing our earth. Do you get that? That's what the gift is all about, subduing our earth. Our earth. Your earth, my earth, the earth that is mine. I mean, I know I go over these things a lot, but folks, I tell you, we have got to begin to understand our earth is our own physical frame, our marital relationship, our children, our family, everything that falls within our sphere of authority, as Paul refers to in 2 Corinthians 13, spheres of authority. But everything within that is my earth. Your earth and my earth are not necessarily the same. They're not the same. They might intertwine. We might be related. There's some other things like that, obviously. But I'm just saying, your earth is your business. It's everything that pertains to you, to your wellness, to your wholeness, your economy, your family, your heritage, whatever, okay? So what I'm saying is this gifted aspect, this gifted characteristic of the Father's blessing was intended to be, the authority or the dominion for subduing our earth. In other words, for shaping our lives in agreement with his blessing. He didn't say, be fruitless, He said, be fruitful, right? He said, fill the earth. He didn't say, empty the earth. So, we see that there is a blessing that went along with this gifting, right? But here's the thing you need to understand about this gifted characteristic. It's yours, not his. So consequently, it is free to be influenced by whatever has captivated your interest. In other words, let me say it this way. Our persuasions, our individual persuasions, will be a matter of our own choosing. You can choose to be persuaded positively about something. You can choose to be and we don't have to look very far around us. We don't even have to probably leave this room to find some contradictory persuasions among us, right? Maybe between husband and wife. And again, you see, this is what I want us to understand. Our persuasions are subject to our particular choices. Got it? To make sure you understand this, right? It's yours. It's not his. He gave it to you. He gave it to us. He put it into all humanity. So our persuasions are absolutely free to be influenced by whatever interests you. And by what I say, whatever interests you, I mean whatever has captivated you to the point of it is your major. It may not be a positive thing. It may be a very ugly thing. It may be a disease. It may be a whatever. But it's what interests you. And so our persuasion is influenced by our interests. We need to understand that, all right? Go with me over to Mark chapter 9 and verse 23. Are you following me so far? Okay. Mark 9:23. Jesus said to him, "If you can believe, all things are possible to him who believes." Okay? So here's what he's saying here. And this is, I want you to understand, this is yet another general reminder, of this dominion principle that we're talking about right now, all right? He said, if you can believe, that means if you can be persuaded. If you can be persuaded, all things. How many things? I want to make sure we got this right. Did he say all things? Yeah, he did. That's what he said. Okay, let me double check it. He said, if you can be persuaded, all things are possible to him who is persuaded. All things, right? Okay. Now the word possible here is a word that means to be empowered, to be energized, to be made capable. So here's what Jesus is saying. All things of which we are persuaded by our persuasion have been empowered, have been energized, have been made capable of producing our persuasion, the outcome of our persuasion. So again, we're talking about a pro, con, positive, negative, either or, good, evil type of thing, right? Now, if you haven't ever observed people living in just total disaster and realized that it was undoubtedly because of what they believed about themselves or what they believed about life and so on and so forth, then maybe you've never been where I've been with people. So again, we've read this thing. If you can believe, if you can be persuaded, all things are possible to him who believes. And we've thought that this referred only to those things that we believe about God, right? Because it's in the Bible. So when we hear if you can believe, it must be about God, right? It's got to be about God. It's in the Bible. Faith must be a God reference, right? Not so. Persuasion is not a God reference. Can be, should be, might be good for us, right? So, but again, this is another wake-up call reminding humanity of the likeness and the abilities that are ever present in the offspring of the Creator. See, Jesus is about resurrecting lost understanding in humanity as the Son of Man. He's about doing other things too, but he's about resurrecting lost knowledge, lost understanding, things from the roots and the origins of human generation that were always true, that never ceased to be true, and have been affecting men adversely from the moment of I was afraid because I was naked and I hid myself. And from that moment on, there was a tremendous reversal of fortunes, so to speak, beginning with the first humans and coming right on down. And so Father's about getting this thing corrected, getting it set back on track, right? All right, now, obviously, as I said, the wise decision, the decision that enables the optimum life experience for us, okay, is in the persuasion of God's goodness, isn't it? In the persuasion of his desires for man, which have been exemplified for us in the life, the sayings, the ministry, and of course the death and resurrection of the Son of Man, right? So we see things, we hear him say things. If you can be persuaded, all things are possible to him who is persuaded. Well, he says that. We see things written about him, that he went about doing good and healing all who were oppressed of the devil. Why? For God was with him, right? And so we hear these things, we read these things, we realize this is the Son of Man exemplifying for us how humanity was intended to fill the earth, subdue it, and so on and so forth, right? All right. And as I said, the wise persuasion is to be persuaded of the goodness of God. And of course, that's what we work on around here all the time, persuading people in every situation, every circumstance, no matter what's going on in life, that God is a good God, right? I don't know how we can sing songs like we sang this morning, talking about, I am loved by you, and not, among many other things, and not say, he wants me well. I cannot think of a single time in our 42 years of marriage and our many years of raising children and grandchildren that Marilyn and I have ever been in any way indifferent to a physical need in any of our children or grandchildren or now great-grandchildren. See, that's our heart, right? If it's our heart, where did we get that heart? From Papa. That's Papa's heart, right? As I said, healing is only one thing among a lot of things. But the point is, how can we read, I am loved by you? How can we sing about grace and unbounding favor that has only to do with some afterlife expectation, right? I mean, we just need to wake up and smell the coffee, right? All right. And we need to realize, and this is what I'm trying to communicate today, that our persuasions empower, enable, make capable many oppositions to our wholeness. Not just the cooperative things that contribute to our wholeness, but they enable and empower the things that stand in opposition to our wholeness, our persuasions, right? I mean, just think back, some of you who were persuaded, maybe for many years. Listen, we'll just make it religious for a moment. We'll bring it into the church house in our relay. How many of us, were persuaded that God was a harsh, judgmental, critical God, always looking over our shoulder, always wanting to correct our behavioral miscues, always needing us to repent? Huh? See, we were persuaded, and it affected the way we lived our lives. I was not a whole man. I was not even a healed man. I had no concept of the healing of my children when I didn't believe God was all the time good. See what I'm saying? I was persuaded of one thing, and I lived in constant torment within. Because I know this would be hard for you to believe, but I was not always a kind and generous and good guy. And I lived in torment of the after effects of my unkindness, my lifestyle and everything else, And I commend you for not believing that I could have ever been that person. And those of you that laughed, anyway. Okay. Now, when I talk about persuasions too, I want to make sure that, that I say that our persuasions are often, things that we have passively accepted as unavoidable influences in life. As I've referred to things like, generational diseases, things like that, things that have been in the family for a long time. And so many times people, without really thinking about it, without meditating on it, they just accept it as their lot in life because this is the way it's always been in my family. And again, in 42 years in the ministry, I've many times heard people say, well, my grandfather died of a heart attack, my father died of a heart attack, and I've heard people prophesy that over themselves, this is the way it's going to be, undoubtedly. Or cancer has always been, there's a, has been cancer. There was breast cancer in my grandmother, breast cancer in my mother. There'll be breast cancer in me, undoubtedly. I mean, and we see those things. We've seen those persuasions in wonderful people, in people that we love, in people that we embrace, in people that, that didn't want it to be that way, but didn't know any better. They just kind of passively accepted it as an unavoidable thing because it's part of their genetic makeup. See what I'm saying? We've heard the same thing with people. I can't remember who it was. I wouldn't tell you who it was anyway, but there was somebody that was a part of our fellowship at some point in time, whose grandmother had been in an insane asylum, mother was in an insane asylum, she had an insane sister or two, and that was just part of their family. Insanity was just part of their family. That was the words of her mouth. See? We see, those are persuasions. Those are passive things. They're not things that people want for themselves. And many times they're not even things that people think stand in contradiction to their faith in God because, that's just part of life. Anyway, let me get on with this. But all right, go to Matthew 8:13. But I want you to see, the reason I'm doing these is I want you to see Jesus reviving lost knowledge. I don't want you to see Jesus displaying himself as a healer. That was not the preeminent or the primary emphasis of Jesus as Son of Man. His primary emphasis was to show us what man was supposed to look like and what man could once again look like. He was the living testimony of it. And so everything he taught, yes, he healed people. You can heal people. He told you to go heal people. He didn't say pray for the sick. He said heal the sick. We'll talk about that later when we get there. Oh, but we have our prayer lines. Well, I'll talk about that later. I'll make fun of that later. Anyway, Matthew 8:13. This is the centurion. Jesus said to the centurion, "Go your way, as you have believed, so let it be done for you." Right? As you have believed. And we know, basically, that what he believed was, if Jesus, the Son of Man, spoke the word only, his servant would be healed, right? But you see, I want you to once again see what he's saying to this guy. Go your way, as you have been persuaded, let it be done for you. So is Jesus saying, because you've believed in me, I'll do this for you? No, it's not what he said at all. What Jesus said is, once more, he's communicating the gift, of our own persuasion becoming the energy of our wholeness, or inversely, the energy of our deception. Of our destruction, I should say. See? That's what Jesus is doing here. He's not displaying himself as healer. He said, go your way. As you have been persuaded, let it be done for you. Right? He didn't even say, let it be done for you. I'll do it. He didn't say, as you've been persuaded, I'll do it for you. That's not what he said. He's reviving lost knowledge. He's calling back to man's roots. And listen, these people that Jesus is traveling in the midst of throughout these Gospels, he said, I didn't come for anybody but the lost sheep of the house of Israel. They're people who knew the accounts that had been recorded by their scribes and their Pharisees. things that we acknowledge as Genesis and the origin of man and so on and so forth now. They knew these things. It wasn't like Jesus was speaking to a bunch of Gentiles that had grown up under the worship of Baal or something. These are people that had grown up with the understandings of Genesis. They were constantly living in the Exodus, right? So Jesus knows who he's talking to. All right. All right, go to Mark chapter 5, verse 28. And you know this is the lady with the issue of blood. We've heard so many things about this, okay? But I want you to look at verse 28 first. For she said, who said? She said. She was convinced of something. She was persuaded of something, and so she said, if only I may touch his clothes, I shall be made well, right? And then when you go down to verse 34, daughter, your persuasion has made you well. Go in peace and be healed of your affliction. Right? If I could just touch the hem of his garment. Well, wait a minute. See, we talk about that. If I could just touch the hem of his garment. We talk about that. But she had said something more than that. A lot of people have touched the hem of his garment, but not with the persuasion that I shall be made well. And then he says to her, daughter, go in peace. Your persuasion has made you well. Go in peace and be healed of your affliction, right? Wow. So again, all these events are Jesus restoring lost knowledge and reviving once again the understanding of the endowment of Genesis 1, 26 and 28. Also of Psalm chapter 8, the 8th Psalm talks about all these things too, right? Now, and remember this. Remember that over in Matthew 18, it says that the Son of Man has come to save that, not who, that which was lost, right? That which was lost. That's the wording of Matthew 18, I think it's verse 11. The Son of Man has come to save, to rescue, to restore that which was lost. Now, we always think that means humanity because we talk about lost humanity, but the reason, you see, that which was lost was the reason for the lostness of humanity. So one preceded the other. The chicken or the egg? I don't know which one, but one preceded the other. See? And when man lost, I'm afraid, I'm naked, right? When he lost that knowledge of who he had been created to be, and whose likeness dwelt within him, say, then the downhill skid began, right? So he came. But anyway, now dominion, using that word or rule, whatever, but the dominion is privilege and influence. We've talked about that a lot, particularly the exousia word of the New Testament, which is translated authority often or power. It's a similar word. I don't remember what the word is in the Old Testament right now, but the word means the same. So it's a word that implies privilege and influence. So what we're told in the beginning is that mankind is gifted with the privilege of influencing our earthen experience. It's a privilege. Son, you need to understand that I have given you control over the outcome of the affairs of your life, of the events of your life. Wow, that was such a mind-blowing situation. I mean, revelation to me back 40 years ago. And it never ceases to come up when I begin to whine. I don't mean from her, I mean from me in my own heart. The Holy Spirit is a reminder of things He's spoken to you. You can roll over and play dead. You can go ahead and be persuaded of failure, loss, whatever. Or, right? Okay. Now, we can obviously see in and around us a lot of things going on that should cause us to question our persuasions then, shouldn't we? But I really like the fact that this lady's persuasion was recorded for us. I shall be made well. Verse 25 told us she had been that way 12 years. As I said before, I've discovered that 12 days is enough to convince most folks that it can't be done. It's interesting to me that along with a lot of the things that we see, of course, most everybody we see in the Gospels, even when it doesn't tell us how long they've been that way, has obviously been that way a long time. But we find this lady at 12 years. We find a lady that was said to be possessed of a spirit of infirmity in the temple for 18 years, this daughter of Abraham, it said. We find the man at Bethesda 38 years infirm, say. But anyway, 12 years this lady's been this like what? And I want you to notice, modern day charismatic Christians, she didn't come for prayers. She didn't come to be prayed for. She came to be made well. I want to tell you a quick little story. Sadly, for this particular woman I'm going to talk about, it didn't necessarily turn out to be a long-time blessing in her total spiritual life, but there was a woman, we were out in another building several years ago. We had our Healing Rooms ministry going, and Marilyn and several of the ladies, maybe some of you were there, I can't remember who was there, but Jackie may have been there, Jenny, somebody. But anyway, I was leaving the church to go out and run an errand or something, and I was about to walk out the front door, and this lady came in, and she had just horrible rheumatoid arthritis. She was about 32 or 33 years old, very young, and just in horrible shape. And as I was going out the door, I knew that the ladies had the prayer room open down there, and they were there. And so I said to this woman, you know, not following my own convictions about things, I said, "Did you come for prayer?" I said, "I'm the pastor here. Did you come for prayer?" And she looked at me and she said, "No, I didn't come to be prayed for. I came to be healed." And she went down to the room, and I didn't tell Marilyn that until later on that she had said that to me, but I showed her where the room was. She walked on down there. She went in. She was in there with Marilyn and whoever the other ladies were for just a few minutes, and she came running out of that room. She came running out of that room. And we saw her years later, and she was still okay of that. Like I say, she had some other things that kind of led her down a wrong road, but she stayed well. But she said, "I didn't come for prayer. I came to be healed." I said, "Well, rebuke me in public, will you?" But anyway, you know, that's the idea. That's what I'm talking about. That's what this woman did, 12 years. That woman had been many years in this rheumatoid arthritis thing. Okay? See, folks today come hoping for an anointed prayer that will initiate the activity of God in their present infirmity. Isn't that the truth? I've done it myself, okay? All right? But these folks don't understand the implications of Philippians 2:13, where Paul said, "It is God." Say, "is God." It is God who works in you. Say, "in me." Okay. Both to will and to do his good pleasure. Now, that's not describing, you know, a visit to the altar or a visit to a prayer line. What that's in reference to is the likeness of Abba in man. It is God. See, Paul understood. God imparted himself. When he said, "Let us make man in our image as our likeness," God imparted himself, his DNA, if you will, to use that term, and it never went away. It is God in you who works in you, right? Both to will, from last week. I just don't have the willpower to overcome this thing. It's because you don't understand it is God. All right, so this is in reference, as I said, you know, to the likeness of Abba in man, equipped with the irrevocable gift of dominion. There's another passage, can't remember where it is, but you'll be familiar with it, where Jesus said, with God, remember we saw a while ago, if you can be persuaded, if you can believe, all things are possible to him who believes, right? If you can be persuaded, all things are possible to him who is persuaded. But there's another passage where Jesus says, with God, all things are possible, right? This will be helpful to you, I think. Biblically or scripturally, the terminology is often said that the woman was with child. What does that mean? The child is in the woman, right? Is that right? With God. See, people are saying, well, if I could just get with God. That's incredibly ignorant for us to say. I mean, we've all said it. I'm not picking on you, but if I could just get with God, if I could just get where God is, if I could just get down to Benny or to Andrew or to Kenneth or to Pastor Mike or somebody, then I could be made whole. No, with God. Now again, as I said last week, I am not discounting, and we will get there eventually, what do I want to say? The encouragement of others and being with others who believe and so on and so forth. I'm not excluding, the need for other people to be in one another's lives. I don't mean that at all. But we need to understand right now that there are some things within each and every one of us by divine gifting from the very beginning of creation that need no one else other than what we have. Now again, please don't take that wrong. I am not a don't need anybody type of person. And you should never be that kind of person either. And there's nothing like the encouragement and the fellowship and the agreement of a group of people. But when we think we got to get more people praying for somebody to be healed, we have totally missed the point. Well, we have 2 people praying, he's not getting any better. Let's see if we can get 10 people. Well, not any better. Let's see if we can put out a prayer chain and get like 750 people praying. Then God will move. God ain't moving. He took up residence in you and he's not leaving. He's already moved. He moved in. Okay? So again, Jesus is, he's restoring the understanding that the Father has always been with man. Always within man. Not just with as around, but within. Because he imparted himself to us, right? All right. We are his genos. Remember Acts 17:29? We are his offspring, his genos. We are of the generation of God, he said to the Athenian heathens. All right, go with me over to 1 Corinthians chapter 3. And let's see if any of this filtered down to Paul from Jesus. Verse 21, therefore let no one boast in men, for all things are yours, right? Whether Paul or Apollos or Cephas or the world or life or death or things present or things to come, all are yours, right? All things are yours. In other words, all things have their potential in us. Why? Because we are with God. Right? Not with child, but with God. We are with God. He went about doing good and healing all who were oppressed of the devil, for God was with him. Wow. Okay. All things. All things. See? Not just those things that God desires for us, but notice what Paul says here. But all things of the world, life, death, present, future. What's Paul saying? Man, your persuasions are powerful. They are your persuasions energize the things of the world, energize life, energize death, energize the present, energize the future. You see, this is not a New Age message. This is not a Gnostic message. This is a revival of our roots, of who we are because of him, of who we are because we are with God. Not at Father's House Ministries, not because we've made a profession of Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior, but because we are created in the image and the likeness of God, even if we're a Muslim, a Buddhist, an atheist, whoever we are, it maketh no difference, ladies and gentlemen. That's a little King James I threw in there, maketh no. Okay, I just want you to make sure you know that I'm familiar with all versions of the Bible. Okay? All right, so in other words, for all of us, it's true that the persuasions of our heart, consciously or unconsciously, are mirrored externally. Now, just without turning to all these scriptures, let me just run through a few things here. So the centurion that we already saw in Matthew 8, there's a blind Bartimaeus that you're probably familiar with in Mark chapter 10, and there's a leper in Luke chapter 17, and they were all told by this same Son of Man, go your way, your persuasion has made you well. There were some others too, but I'm just using those, right? Now, here's what I want to emphasize for a moment. He said, go your way. go your way. See, it's your way because, first of all, God made you to have privilege and influence over the way. So whichever way you go, you're going your way. I wish I could just go God's way. No, you're going to go your way no matter what. Now, again, it's better to be persuaded of the goodness of God and his desires for you, right? But it's your way because you determine by your persuasion, right? Go your way. All right, the woman in Mark 5:34 that we saw, a woman who was labeled a sinner, one who was anointing the feet of Jesus, and the Pharisees judged her a sinner, right? These women heard Jesus say, go in peace. Your persuasion saved you. Your persuasion. She didn't ask Jesus for forgiveness as she anointed his feet, wept and wiped his feet with her hair and so on. She didn't ask for anything from Jesus. She was there just demonstrating that she believed, that she was persuaded that he was compassion and personified, that he was the love of God personified. See? Well, that persuasion, he said, that's saved you. But he said, go in peace to both of these women. That should strike a chord of remembrance for things we've talked about. See, these women were being told that from the inside out they were being healed. Go in peace. They were restored, made whole from the inside out. Isn't that right? In Romans 14, Paul said this. He said, let each, I could point my finger all around the room now, or we could point our finger to everybody that passes by. Let each be fully persuaded in his own mind. In other words, go your way, regardless of the skeptics, regardless of the cynics, regardless of the theologically superior minds that would tell you that this physical thing is really not for today. See, I agree with so much of the things that are rising to the surface finally in theology, things that are being brought out that have been hidden from it. But you know what, as I've told you before, I will never, I don't care. I mean, really, it doesn't make any difference what happens to me. Like I said, none of us are getting out of here alive anyway, right? And it won't make any difference to me how I go. I will not go discounting these truths. Right? I'm not going to make any claims as to how I will go or when I will go or my great faith or any of that. I'm not going to make any claims like that. But I'm going to tell you that this is truth. Okay, regardless. And I'm going to get, as I believe you are, the best out of what I can with my understanding and my persuasion. I'm not interested in living forever. See, my children are raised. My wife and I have a wonderful life together. We have wonderful grandchildren. I would love to be around to do the last one's wedding. The way my kids are having grandchildren, that would be like 173 years old by the time I do the last one's wedding. But, you know, and I might not even understand I was at a wedding by that time. I might need him to make me some more wine out of water just to get... Anyway. So then you say, well, here I am living in a world, you know, full of persuasive influences, and we are, coming at me from every direction. How am I to become persuaded so as to make my way harmonize with the Father's will? Well, let's do an old familiar one and then we'll alter it, of course. Joshua 1:8. Everybody knows this. But this is something that was so, again, I'm using some things that I don't commonly use around here anymore out of the Old Testament because these had such persuasive influence on Marilyn and I in the beginning. And fortunately for us, we understood them in a way that didn't comprise works. This book of the law. So first of all, we're not interested in the book of the law. But we'll talk about that in a minute. But he said to Joshua, this book of the law shall not depart from your mouth. That means your mouth shall constantly be talking is what it means, okay? And mine is. You've noticed that, right? Okay. All right. But you shall meditate in it day and night that you may observe. That means to experience according to all that is written in it. It says observe to do. But it means to experience all that is written in it. For then you, everybody say you, Said, though, then you will make your way prosperous. Then you will have good success. All right? You shall meditate day and night that you may observe or experience all things. Right? Neil, that needle gets stuck in that groove all the time. Then you will make your way and have success. Remember your way? Go your way? Go your way, for your persuasion has made you whole, right? Now, our source we know is not to be the book of the law. Our source is our Gilead, our heap of testimony, our body of evidence, Jesus, the body of evidence. The Jesus, if you've seen me, you've seen the Father, body of evidence, right? That's our source, not the book of the law. You shall meditate in the body of evidence day and night, right? Not the evidence that you've seen around you, because most of us will say, well, I've seen more failure than I have success, right? I've prayed for folks they didn't get well, or whatever, So we'll take those things, and that'll be the thing that we'll meditate on day and night. But no, we're to meditate on our Gilead, our body of evidence, day and night, right? Now, I'm going to tell you that this persuasion is not hard to come by. In fact, in Deuteronomy, we're told it is not too difficult for you. But the word is in you. Is he in you? Yes, he's in you. And in your mouth, right? So it's not too difficult to do. The problem is that some folks are so swallowed up in the consideration of 12 years, 18 years, 38 years, or lame from my mother's womb, that they don't have any time that's what they meditate on day and night. Now, listen, again, I'm compassionate towards that. I'm understanding of that. I'm understanding that for Susan, who is in a wheelchair 24/7, I understand the difficulties that are presented to us with these things. That's why we are on a road to recovery, walking it together as a compassionate, caring demonstration of the body of evidence, right? I'm hoping to revive some things in some of you folks that maybe you hung on to earlier in your experience and have maybe gotten away from because of the lack of evidence. The lack of evidence is never in Jesus, our body of evidence. The lack of evidence is always in the world, right? And so I understand, and I'm very compassionate and empathetic and sympathetic as well. So please don't ever take me as being critical about these things, right? But it's impossible. Naturally speaking, it would be impossible to ignore your situation. Okay? But we can, what do I want to say, overlay or overpower or something by beginning to really meditate in our body of evidence. When we understand the Son of Man as the evidence of the Father's will, purpose, desire, whatever, for humanity, when we understand that and we can meditate on that, when we quit breaking it down and say, well, I know it's God's will for all men to be whatever. He's not willing that any should perish, but that all should be saved, right? We know that. Well, when the word saved is diagnosed for you or diagrammed for you, the word means healed in every aspect of your existence, okay? All right. So anyway, let me wrap up with this. Paul had more affliction than anyone other than Jesus, as recorded in the Bible for us, and he was still able to say, I know whom I have believed, and I am persuaded. I know my Gilead, right? And I am persuaded that he is able to keep what I have committed to him. What have I committed to him? My persuasion, right? Of his entire welfare and provision, spirit, soul, and body. Now, the last thing I'm going to say is this. Some folks have said to me, so really, Mike, what you're saying is it does come down to works on our part. No, it doesn't. That has always amazed me, that people would say that what I'm asking you to do when I ask you to be persuaded of truth that's been revealed to us in Jesus, that it somehow or another it's a work. Yeah. It's always amazed me. I'm confused as to why folks will meditate day and night on destructive and futile things, and then they think it's works to meditate on Jesus.
Yeah.
Now think about that, because folks, I mean, I can't tell you how many times people have said to Marilyn and I over the last 40 years, well, it is works because it's about what I must do. I must be persuaded. Well, damn it. How stupid can we be and still breathe? You know, I mean, that's really, think about it. I either believe my wife when she tells me something or I don't. I don't have to say, I got to confess about it. Marilyn said dinner's at 5. Marilyn said dinner's at 5. Marilyn, and maybe if I say it enough, it'll be dinner at 5. I mean, if you really get silly with things once in a while, it make you realize how ridiculous we are. I love all of you. Have a great day. Let's